This hearing will come to order. Good morning, everyone. I've been told the director is running a little late, so we'll get started without her. Again, I'd like to welcome all of our witnesses. I appreciate the time you put into preparing your testimony. It's very informative. This is a very serious issue because earlier this month, the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, announced that over the last year, hackers stole 4.1 million federal employees' personal records. Then, just days later, we learned the attack was actually far broader, involving some of the most sensitive data the federal government holds on its employees and likely many more records. It is hard to overstate the seriousness of this breach. It has put people's lives and our nation at risk. This massive theft of data may be the largest breach the federal government has seen to date. But it's not the first data breach affecting federal agencies or even OPM. Unfortunately, I doubt it will be the last. Our nation is dependent on cyber infrastructure, and that makes our future vulnerable. The cyber threats against us are going to continue to grow in size and sophistication. The purpose of this hearing is to lay out the reality of that cyber threat and vulnerability. The first step in solving any problem is recognizing and admitting you have one. We must acknowledge we have a significant cybersecurity problem in the federal government, especially at OPM. This intrusion on OPM networks is only the latest of many against the agency, and OPM has become a case study in the consequences of inadequate action and neglect. Cybersecurity on federal agency networks has proven to be grossly inadequate. Foreign actors, cyber criminals, and hacktivists are accessing our networks with ease and impunity. While our defenses are antiquated, by comparison, our adversaries are proving to be highly sophisticated. Meanwhile, agencies are concentrating their resources trying to dictate cybersecurity requirements for private companies, which in many cases are implementing cybersecurity better and cheaper. OPM has been hacked 5 times in the last 3 years and has still not responded to effectively secure its network. Today's hearing will focus on the 2 most recent breaches. We will hear from the OPM Inspector General, Mr. Patrick McFarland, that OPM has continued to neglect information security, which may have contributed to these breaches. We will hear from Dr. Andy Ozment about the specifics of this attack, as well as the Department of Homeland Security's role in federal cybersecurity. Mr. Tony Scott will testify about efforts on cybersecurity across the government and the information security requirements of federal agencies. Finally, we will give OPM Director Katherine Archuleta an opportunity to explain how this happened on her watch, to let us know who she believes is responsible, and to clarify what we can expect from OPM going forward. There's a bullseye on the back of USA.gov, and it does not appear this administration is devoting enough attention to this reality. We need leadership to develop and implement an effective plan to stop future cyber attacks. Without effective cybersecurity, our nation will not be safe or secure. Cybersecurity must be a top priority. So I want to thank the witnesses, welcome everybody here in the hearing room. I'm looking forward to the testimony, and with that, I'll turn it over to our ranking member, Senator Carper. McFarland, I'd like to start my questioning with you. Looking back at your audits under the Federal Information Security Management Act, if we just start with fiscal year 2009, you don't have to go much further than the first or second page of the executive summary to understand that security of the IT systems has been a problem. In your November 5th, 2009 report, you report lack of adequate information security governance activities in accordance with legislative and regulatory requirements. In your November 10th, 2010 report, you say, we also expanded the material weaknesses related to IT security policies to include concerns with the agency's overall information security governance and its information security management structure. In your November 2011 report, you say, we continue to believe that information security governance represents a material weakness in OPM's IT security program. November 5, 2012, and this is actually pretty troubling because in the audit, the Office of Chief Information Officer response to your draft audit report indicated that they disagreed with the classification of the material weakness because of the progress that OPM had made with its IT security program and because there was no loss of sensitive data during the fiscal year. However, the OCIO's statement is inaccurate, as there were, in fact, numerous information security incidents in FY 2012 that led to the loss or unauthorized release of mission-critical or sensitive data. In other words, in 2012 report, the Office of Chief Information Officer was in a state of denial. November 21, 2013, second page of your report, says that OPM's decentralized government structure continues to result in many instances of noncompliance with FISMA requirements. Therefore, we are again reporting this issue as a material weakness for FY 2013. 2014, probably the best thing you can say in terms of improvements is the material weaknesses related to information security governance has been upgraded to a significant deficiency due to the planned reorganization of OCIO. And again, I'm highly concerned about this flash audit. On the infrastructure improvement project, your conclusion, as a result, there's a high risk that this project will fail to meet the objectives of providing a secure operating environment for OPM systems and applications. You go on to say, in our opinion, the project management approach to this major infrastructure overhaul is entirely inadequate and introduces a very high risk of project failure. It's pretty clear that security of the IT system has been a problem, a material problem for quite some time. Now, when Director Archuleta came before this committee and this Senate for confirmation, in her written answers to our questions, she said, if confirmed as Director of OPM, improved management of OPM's IT, including proper security and data management, will be one of my top priorities. I will work with OPM CIO and IG to ensure that adequate measures are in place to protect this vital information. Mr. McFarland, has Director Archuleta, has she ever met with you specifically to discuss the results of your FISMA audits?
No, sir.
Do you meet with her regularly?
Meet with her at least once a month.
To what extent have you ever discussed the material problems with the security of the IT systems of OPM?
The memorandum in front of me is dated June 17th from us to the Director, and it spells out the flash audit alert with a lot of information in it. And that was presented to her office. 1 week prior to that, we made sure that the Chief of Staff had a copy to help the flow of information for us. But we have not sat down, the Director and I, regarding this. We have not heard back, other than last Tuesday when we received the response to our flash audit response.
So do you believe that her statement that she would work with OPM, CIO, and IG to ensure that adequate measures are in place to protect this vital information, do you believe she's fulfilled that commitment?
Well, I don't believe she's fulfilled that commitment specifically with me, but I would assume, and maybe right, maybe wrong, but I would assume that her explanation entails the CIO's involvement with our office.
But here's the problem. We've had 3 material breaches under her watch. On March 2014, the Chinese breached OPM looking for background investigations. And of course, the subject of this hearing is the 2 most recent breaches. Director Archuleta, do you believe you fulfilled that commitment that you made to this committee and this Senate, that you will work with OPM's IG to ensure that adequate measures are in place to protect this vital information?
I believe I'm fulfilling that commitment, sir. With regard to the strategic plan that I promised that I would develop during I promised in the confirmation, is that we have moved towards that, and your concerns about governance are exactly right. There was not a governance structure, and it was one of the first things I did was to hire a capable and qualified CIO.
Again, my time's running out. Why have you not met with the Inspector General, who is tasked with these audits and has given you a lot of, it's basically laid out the problem for you? Why haven't you met and discussed this problem with the Inspector General?
Thank you. We do meet on a monthly basis.
But not to talk about this IT security situation,
the agenda,
which was going to be a top priority of your term.
Yes. The agenda is set by the IG, and he has been very helpful in identifying issues throughout the agency. With regard to the flash audit, my staff and his staff are meeting on Tuesday. We've not had a meeting since his release of the flash audit, but he and I will follow up first with staff, and then we have a meeting together. We've not, as Mr. McFarland indicated, had the opportunity to meet yet, but I'm sure it was his intention and always my intention that we would sit down and discuss this as we have with all other issues.
Have you spoken to the President about this breach?
Yes, I have spoken to the President.
When?
It was,
About this breach, about the most recent breach of
Yes,
the
I have.
4.1 million to possibly 18 million.
I did brief the President on
Records.
this, and he has made it repeatedly clear that cyber threats are one of his most serious economic and national security challenges as we face the nation. And he has, in his administration, pursued a comprehensive strategy, including the appointment of Tony Scott, boosting our defenses in government and sharing more information. He's also directed the establishment of a cyber intelligence center and called on the Congress to pass legislation.
Okay, when did you speak with the President about this?
Approximately 2 weeks ago.
Do you understand the full gravity of the risk to this nation, the risk to people's lives, government officials that are trying to protect this nation because of the release of this information?
Of course I do. Of course I do. I am as upset as you are about this. And that is why we've worked from day one to set in place the steps that had not existed there before. And I think, and if you notice in the plan that I've sent you, we've taken significant steps towards that. But we're looking at nearly 30 years of a legacy system and no improvements prior to the time that I got there. Not none, but not enough. And so as you look at the improvements we have made, certainly we've made important steps, but we need to make more, and that's why we're asking Congress for their support.
Okay, Senator Carper. I do want to point out, as best as I can determine the information given to me, we spend something like $80 billion per year on IT systems in the federal government. So this is a problem of management. It's a problem of prioritization. And that's why I pointed out in my opening statement that this should be a top priority of the federal government. If it was made a top priority, there should be plenty of funding within the current budget to provide this kind of security. Senator Carper. Dr. Ozment, based on Senator Sass's questions, I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of activity. You know, you combine the IG reports that have been showing the lack of security or the material problems with security, just trying to get this all straight. It's difficult. Is it true that DHS did write a mitigation plan based on that November 2013 attack?
Yes, Senator. When DHS's incident response team goes on site to any incident, as part of their report out of that incident, they say, here are some of the steps that we recommend that an agency take to bolster its defenses. It's not a complete plan. It's not a, ground-up look at a network. It's based on what we saw in our time here. We recommend that you make the following changes.
Okay. I'm not sure our committee has access to that plan, so can you provide that to the committee, please?
I'll take that back, sir.
Appreciate that. Rather than start a second round right away, I'll just defer to Senator Portman for your first round. Portman, I just want to kind of get the timeline straight on these breaches we're talking about that are subject to this hearing. The breach that involved personnel information occurred in December of 2014 and discovered in April of this year, about 4 months later. Is that correct, Director Archuleta?
Yes, sir.
And the breach that involved all of the background information, the very sensitive national security background information, that occurred a year ago in June of 2014 and basically took 12 months to discover. And that was actually discovered because we implemented some, dual authentication process, and we actually prevented them from continuing to exfiltrate the information?
Sir, if you will, I'll recapitulate the full set of dates because I think you're right, it is extremely important. The Department of Interior Data Center And as you know, the investigation on all of these continues, so we learn new information all the time. All of these were discovered due to the April 2015 discovery. So OPM rolled out new security technologies as they had been rolling out new security technologies, detected an intrusion on their networks in April of 2015. They gave DHS the cyber threat indicators, similar to what's being discussed in information sharing legislation. We used those and identified the breach at the Department of Interior. The breach at the Department of Interior, the adversary was on the network of the Department of Interior from October of 2014 through April of 2015. Specific pieces of data were removed in December of 2014. So that's where the December date is coming out. But looking at the whole range of when the adversary was on the network, it was October 2014 through April 2015. And I would encourage you to think about that as the most relevant time frame.
Okay.
At OPM itself, there are really two key time frames. The time frame when the adversary was on the network, which was May of 2014 to April of 2015, but the time that the adversary was essentially active on the network was only June of 2014 through January of 2015. OPM rolled out a security control in January of 2015 that stopped the adversary from taking further significant action, but it didn't detect the adversary. So the adversary was largely stopped in January, but not detected until an additional control was rolled out in April.
Okay, and then again, so we found out in mid-April, and we announced this on June 4th. I mean, the public became aware of this on June 4th.
So in mid-April, we discovered that the adversary was on the network, but not what they had done. And so we then commenced the forensics work. The forensics work reached a high confidence level more rapidly at the Department of Interior. So the Department of Interior, they more rapidly finished the forensics or largely finished the forensics investigation and were able to conclude the breach.
So again, so I understand that takes time. Mr. Scott, you, in your role within OMB as the federal government's chief information officer, you did announce the cybersecurity sprint last week. I realize you're relatively new in the role, starting in February, and we're not going to solve these problems overnight. I got that. Why didn't we announce a more robust effort right off the bat, basically in April?
So we formed a eGov cyber unit late last year in my office, put that team together, worked closely with DHS and so on. And I began with that team to look at the cross-government data. Some of the elements of what we announced in the sprint, we actually started before the full sprint was announced. So it's been an escalating set of activities.
So again, you've expressed a fair amount of confidence in Director Archuleta and her team to fix this. But again, I go back to the Federal Information Security Management Act audits. And this, even in fiscal year 2009, in that audit, first page of the executive summary says the lack of policies and procedures was reported as a material weakness in fiscal year FY 2007, fiscal year 2008. The weakness in our government security systems has been known for a long time. I understand it's going to, you don't solve these problems overnight. I understand that Director Archuleta has been in the office about 18 months. But certainly, having been a manager in the private sector myself, again, I don't expect perfection. I understand the problems are, difficult to solve. But I'm looking for people to prioritize. I'm looking at people's actions that they took. And the fact that the director did not meet with the Inspector General to specifically discuss these IG reports, the fact that she has not yet met with FBI Director Comey on these very serious issues really gives me pretty great pause in terms of having confidence that the current management team in OPM really is up to the task. Do you disagree with that? I mean, do you really have that great a confidence? Again, you are the federal government's chief information officer. Do you really have confidence in the management team of OPM that they're going to be able to solve this problem when they've shown such a lack of attention and priority to this issue? And let's face it, a record of failure now.
Well, Senator, I think there's several bits of evidence I can go back to, many of which you've mentioned here, but the history going back to 2009 and 10 shows that there's been a historical set of issues there. If I look at in OPM and elsewhere where progress has been made, I can see a delineation point from when Director Archuleta took place and recruited Donna Seymour into that role, where there's dramatic difference in terms of the actions that not only were planned, but then began execution. And I worry in this particular case that as we deploy more tools across the federal government, and as we are likely to discover more of these kinds of issues, that there's a chilling effect on anybody wanting to come in and take one of these roles.
I understand.
and do the hard work.
And again, that is a real problem, and I appreciate that you're willing to exit, the private sector and, with your expertise and bring that to bear in terms of service to this nation. But again, here's my problem: a flash audit on on the infrastructure improvement project, with the final conclusion is, in our opinion, according to the Inspector General, the project management approach for this major infrastructure overhaul is entirely inadequate and introduces a very high risk of project failure. That doesn't give me much confidence in the management team that's implementing that. Inspector General McFarland, do you have confidence in, based on your audits, on the work you've done, do you have confidence in OPM's current management to really follow through on this and provide the security I think this nation deserves?
I believe that the interest and the intent is there, but based on what we've found, no.
I have no further questions. Senator Ayotte. Inspector General, again, thank you for your service. Thank you for your independence. I want to thank all the witnesses for the time you've spent, for your thoughtful testimony and your answers to our questions. The hearing record will remain open for 15 days until July 10th at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is adjourned.